So does your base completely suck? Your castle looking like a matchbox, or things just randomly collapsing at the smallest gust of wind? Well, that is because you need some base building tips. And that is exactly what I have for you in this video. I have quite a few that helped me out a ton to both build cooler looking bases and also make them a lot more functional. So let's get started with the first one, which I'm sure you've encountered many times. Maybe you're there just laying wood or even building an awesome bridge, only to get hit by this error screen right here saying that you don't have enough support. And the main reason why that is happening is because you're trying to lay down roof without having any actual foundation to support it. However, the cool thing about foundation, as you'll see in the next practical examples, is that A, they don't have to actually be straight underneath the roof to even count. Second of all, they don't even have to be connected via walls to each individual roof for that to count. And third of all, you can even keep them up to 2 spaces away from your actual roof. As long as it's parallel, it's still going to provide you that support that you need. So let's go over a few practical examples. In the first example, we have foundation underneath the roof. This is something most commonly used whenever you're building bridges or just simple structures, but essentially you will never want to start building one of these by building the roof first. In fact, you will want to first place down these foundation elements over whichever gap you're trying to close or whatever distance you want that bridge or structure to be at. So in this case, if I were to destroy this foundation, as you can see, it also destroys that roof at the top. And the opposite also goes. So if I were to build extra foundation elements underneath and parallel to that roof, this is going to provide me even more support so that I can extend the roof above by up to 2 elements extra compared to the, well, foundation that I built below. So much so that at the end of it, I can just place down a normal wall and then connect it to a bunch of stairs. And now that we have support from the other side, we can easily destroy the foundation and now have the proper gap supported by both sides. The same goes even if we place the same foundation line right next to the bridge instead of underneath, but still parallel and still connected to the starting point. So in this case, it still extends how much we can build roof at the top, and the opposite is true. If we delete it at the bottom, the top also suffers. But you can then bring this to the true final level, which is that you can still have the same support benefit even 2 spaces away from the same foundation. So for example, if you laid a bunch of foundation to act as your base roads, you can actually use those to power up literally any building up to 2 spaces away from it. So let me give you an example. Let's say we go 2 spaces away from this road. So in this case, we even have one line that is a complete gap. As you will see right here, we can extend the bridge at the top while still taking advantage of all that structural integrity that parallel line still gives us. So if I were, for example, to go ahead and delete these, as you can see, they do affect that even though it is 2 spaces away. Now, for this to happen, you're going to have these connected at least in one of the points. So obviously they will have to run parallel and there has to be a point of intersection. So one line has to be perpendicular on both of their ends. However, that's very easy to do. As long as you have just a road section, you're going to be able to build these very easily and already gain a massive advantage. Now, what you can do from this point is to combine the previous 2 tips with the next one and essentially build almost anything you can imagine, even like these huge base build platforms that only rest on one single pillar. So while it is true that, yeah, you only have that adjacency support bonus, very limited horizontally, vertically you have it infinite. So for example, you can pretty much stack walls on top of each other and you can do so infinitely without having to worry about any of the support beneath, as you can pretty much go up into space with them, or at least for as long as you still have resources in your inventory. Knowing this, you can then combine it with the previous trick, and yes, that adjacency support for your roofing works even all of this way up. So all of that foundation that acts as a road that we have down below works even all of this way up. So if I were to go ahead and place down these roof elements, as you can see, I can continue and build for as long as I have that belt road right there below. So this is going to go for as far as I just told you, up to 2 spaces away from it. You can build very easily and still have it support all the way up to space if you were to build it that high. Well, or at the very least, very high up, at least up until I build it right here, but it can definitely go all the way up. And because I build a basic square over there, which encompasses my, well, breathing pans, I can just build all around here, connect the belts, and then fill all of these gaps without suffering from any, well, lapses or anything like that. You can connect everything very easily because you have all of those foundations below, affecting all of these structures all the way up. Now, we talked about those roads. Let's actually put them into practice and how you can actually build this low into the ground. Now, normally, if you were to take some of these foundation elements, as you can see, if you're too close to the character with them, they kind of clip straight above the ground. It doesn't let you bring them below it. However, if you bring that camera a bit further away and move them away from your character, you can then see you can start clipping them through the actual ground. So this is essentially how you can lay down these foundation roads all over your base. And this is going to give you a better way to just navigate, but also to organize your base. Which brings me to the next tip. Whenever you're trying to create the base, or at least that's what I'm doing, the first thing that I'm always doing is to go in the center of it and start laying down these roads. This is going to give me the possibility to organize everything much better, because now I can kind of split it into sections and kind of think of things that I want to place in them. Maybe a bunch of farms, maybe my house, maybe a castle, maybe some of those breathing pans. This is going to give me a much better view of how the base layout is going to be, rather than doing it the other way around and starting with building houses and then having to resort to building these foundations. Plus, because they snap to one another, you can create perfect straight lines. So this is going to give you a better way to not have very disjointed areas connecting to each other. It's going to keep things very clean for you. This brings us to the next tip. Let's say you have a base in which the terrain is not really helpful. You may have even different elevation levels, but you still want to connect them and maybe create some really cool houses, but have them snappy and connected to the ones below. So in this case, I usually start from below, putting up some of these base foundations up until I can reach the maximum, for example, over one of these hills. In this case, you're going to immediately build a set of stairs, and at the end of that stairs, you can only build one single roof. Because, yeah, you guessed it, the others will not have enough support. So what do you do from this point on? Well, you actually again have to use the foundation, and the foundation has that really cool clipping trick. So for a perfect alignment, what I do is I stay a bit further back, pick up that foundation element, and then try my best to keep it right there in the center, looking at the lines of that floor that I just built on the other side. And in this case, you're going to try to clip it straight through it a little bit so that you can see that these lines are all perfectly straight. And from this point on, you're going to want to stay there in the red still a little bit, and then slightly tap the button to move a bit further back. Try to fiddle with this until you see it being in the perfect spot to be blue and buildable and not in the red. Immediately place it perfectly, and yeah, actually it was perfect. So this was actually a pretty good example. Now you can do a couple of tries until you get it right, but essentially what this achieves is that now you have a connection point. This is going to still exist and persist even if the one below gets destroyed. And best of all, you can also connect them with an actual foundation to make everything even better and continuous. And what this achieves is a perfect alignment and even perfect snapping of whatever structures you follow up with next, so that everything looks very well organized. This is exactly what I used to also achieve the same base layout on my second playthrough, which by the way I'm gonna follow up to really soon. But I really like these types of challenges to make absolute beautiful bases despite the terrain difficulties. Now let's move on to number 7, and one of the interesting structures I constantly like building are some of these half platforms slash podiums. This is a very good way to just keep yourself organized and place maybe a bunch of workbenches. But the takeaway here is that, well, the stairs can clip downwards through almost anything, mostly as long as they come last in the chain of builds. So in this case, you're going to again start with a foundation, except keep it midway in the ground, so half of it is outside, half of it is inside. From this point on, you might not be able to immediately build a set of stairs, especially if there's something in front of it. So in my case, that would be the road. However, you can just go ahead and delete whatever is in front of it, and this then lets you put and clip that through it. And once you do that, you can place down the road or whatever you had after it, because these stairs, as I've said, can clip through a lot of stuff. But usually you have to put them last for that to properly work. The The same goes if you were to want to close the gap on the sides of the stairs. You cannot do it with the triangles after the stairs are down. You have to start with the triangles and then place down the stairs last, but this will give you a much more clean setup, especially when you're trying to build some of these staircases or even bridges. Now at number 9, nothing is worse than having a matchbox for a castle, especially since if you build regular structures or especially like tall walls or wide walls, it's going to kind of look like that. And there's one trick that I learned from my wife. I didn't know this by my own, but basically you can use some of these defensive walls to give your castle this really cool 3D look, especially since they can clip through anything. So yes, they can even stand on their own and you can place them right in front of already built walls. However, you might have a little gap, but again, you can just connect these a little bit better and have that gap completely disappear. But like I said, this gives it that really cool medieval look, also a more 3D sort of aspect, so it really pops out from the distance. Plus, it also protects your own structure since these defensive walls are much better than regular walls. Plus, as I've said, you can also connect joints that normal walls cannot. So let's say, for example, you cannot use a regular wall because it's getting blocked by the nearby mountain. In this case, what you can do is to simply set up one of these. It clips through both the terrain as well as your own structure, and this is going to pretty much complete the entire look while making things functional for you. You can of course add other elements too. There are decorations in there that you can use, but I also love some of these balconies slash bridges you can create by simply placing down a wooden roof over one of your floors and then connect it with a bunch of these triangle walls. So this is going to help a ton to just give it that pop out kind of vibe and have it a little bit more complex than having just something there that's a matchbox. I've done this with all of my castles, but of course you can make other sort of appearances too. Like for example, I really enjoy placing down some of these gaps slash connecting tunnels in between rooms, which essentially is just taking down some of the outer walls and bringing them slightly in and then connecting the sides with a bunch of doors to give it this really cool sort of outside-ish look that you can achieve with them. And that brings us to the 10th and final tip. You might have noticed that many of my structures are a few stories up and some of them actually quite tall. Well, the reason for that is because you don't want things to be too small. In fact, I don't even recommend having just one level roof over your head. I recommend having 2 or at least 3, especially if you're building something like a house for your companions. So pals can go up to like super large sizes, and usually that means 3 stories up, or 3 of these walls stacked on top of each other. That's usually what you're aiming for, plus of course the rooftop, which would give you more than enough for any pal in your, well, pal deck to be capable of sleeping without clipping through anything. Plus, it also helps to spread things out and keep things large so that anything that moves in your base doesn't get stuck in it. Keep those separate from one another, but have the entire rest of the base just opened up so that anything can travel through them without any difficulties. Do this and I guarantee you can both build an amazing looking base as well as make it functional. But this is pretty much it. Totally let me know down below in the comments what other secret tips are you using to keep your, well, base very organized or just looking very crisp. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.